Have you ever wondered why the image of Christ has endured for over 2,000 years? Not just as a figure of religion, but as a symbol that seems to live in the depths of the human psyche? Whether you are spiritual or not, the story of Christ holds a mirror to something universal, the process of inner transformation. It's not only about belief in God, but also about the journey of awakening that every human soul must face. Behind the historical figure lies a timeless psychological truth. Christ's crucifixion, death, and resurrection represent the death of the ego and the birth of the true self. From a psychological point of view, Christ is not just a man who lived in a specific time. He is a symbol of the inner self, the divine spark that exists within each of us. Carl Jung saw Christ as an archetype, an image that expresses the process of individuation, the journey toward wholeness. When the Gospels say the kingdom of God is within you, it's not a metaphor for moral goodness. It is a direct pointer to an inner state of consciousness. When read symbolically, the story of Christ's life describes the path that every individual must take to transcend illusion, confront their shadow, and awaken to a deeper identity beyond personality. Let's start with the birth story. The Christ child is born in a manger, surrounded by animals, far from the comfort of a palace. On the surface, this is a tale of humility, but symbolically, it reveals something profound. Divine consciousness is born in the most humble, unconscious part of the psyche. The animals represent our instincts, our primal drives, the earthy part of human nature. For light to enter the world, it must first be born among the shadows, within the unconscious. This is why transformation often begins in moments of darkness, confusion, or despair. The birth of inner light always happens in the stable of the soul, not in its throne room. As the story unfolds, we meet Herod, the ruler who tries to kill the newborn child. Herod represents the ego, the part of us that fears the new awareness that threatens its control. The ego resists awakening because it knows that when the light of consciousness grows, its reign begins to end. In your own life, you've likely felt this resistance. The voice that says, "Don't change, stay safe, you're fine as you are." But every step toward transformation challenges that voice. Herod's pursuit is the psyche's natural defense mechanism, a fear of death, not of the body, but of identity itself. Then comes the baptism in the Jordan River. Water has always symbolized emotion, intuition, and cleansing. When Christ descends into the river, it signifies immersion into the unconscious. To begin transformation, one must confront what lies beneath the surface, the buried memories, the unhealed wounds, the forgotten parts of the self. Emerging from the water, he hears the voice of the Father saying, "This is my beloved Son." Psychologically, this moment represents the recognition of one's divine origin, that beyond your fears, beyond your story, there is something sacred observing it all. You are not the storm, you are the awareness behind it. After baptism, Christ retreats into the desert for 40 days. This desert is not only a place, but a state of consciousness, the emptiness one must face when the distractions of the world are stripped away. There, he is tempted by the devil, which is not an external being, but the inner voice of the ego offering shortcuts to power, pleasure, and validation. Every spiritual seeker faces these same temptations, to seek happiness through control, recognition, or dominance rather than through truth. The desert teaches the soul that true strength comes not from possession, but from surrender. And then comes the central image, the crucifixion. Perhaps no symbol in history is as misunderstood or as powerful. From a psychological lens, the cross represents the point where the human and divine intersect. It is the moment when the false self, built on fear, pride, and illusion, is nailed to the structure of reality and dies. But this death is not destruction, it is liberation. The ego screams, "Why have you forsaken me?" because it cannot comprehend its own dissolution. Yet beyond that cry, something deeper awakens. When everything you thought you were begins to fall apart, your beliefs, your roles, your defenses, what remains is consciousness itself. The crucifixion happens every time you let go of control, every time you allow an old identity to die so that a new awareness can be born. The resurrection, then, is not the supernatural return of a body. It is the rebirth of consciousness. It is the recognition that what you truly are cannot die. When the stone is rolled away, it's a symbol of the barriers of ignorance being lifted from the human mind. The empty tomb is the realization that the self was never confined to form. Jung called this the process of individuation, the moment when the individual becomes whole, integrating both light and shadow, human and divine. The resurrection happens not once in history, but every moment you awaken from illusion into presence. Christ's miracles can also be read as symbols of psychological healing. When he heals the blind, it means gaining inner sight, the ability to see reality as it is. When he calms the storm, it represents mastering the chaos of emotion through awareness. When he turns water into wine, it is the transformation of basic instinct into spiritual insight. These are not mere supernatural acts. They are metaphors for inner alchemy. The divine power he displays is the same potential hidden within each human being. As he says, "You will do greater things than these." The cross and the resurrection together form the map of inner transformation. To follow Christ psychologically means to descend into your own unconscious, to face your darkness without judgment, and to allow your false identities to die. It means realizing that salvation is not escape from the world, but awakening within it. You don't have to believe in theology to experience this truth. You only have to become conscious. That is why Christ says, "Take up your cross and follow me." It's not an invitation to suffer, but to transform, to carry your pain consciously until it becomes light. Every human being, in some way, walks this path. The betrayals we experience, the losses we endure, the moments of despair, these are our crucifixions. When you stop resisting them and begin to see them as initiations, resurrection becomes possible. The story of Christ is the eternal story of consciousness awakening through the human experience. It is your story, hidden beneath your daily struggles and silent realizations. But to truly understand Christ as a symbol for transformation, we must go beyond theology and enter the realm of inner experience. The cross, the resurrection, the teachings, all of them are psychological metaphors for what happens inside you when the ego dies and awareness awakens. The crucifixion represents the shattering of illusion, the painful dissolution of everything you thought you were. And the resurrection symbolizes what is reborn after that death, the self that exists beyond fear, pride, and control. This is why Christ's story is not just about one man who lived 2,000 years ago. It is about every human being who dares to awaken. To carry your cross means to face your own suffering consciously. To die before you die means to let go of the false self so the true self can live. When you understand this, you realize the gospel is not external history. It is the inner map of awakening. When Jesus says, "The kingdom of God is within you," he's not speaking poetically. He is pointing to a direct psychological reality. Heaven is not a location. It is a state of consciousness. The gates of heaven are not in the sky. They open in your perception the moment you drop resistance and see clearly. The miracle stories, too, carry profound symbolism. When Christ heals the blind, he's not only restoring physical sight, he's revealing inner vision. When he calms the storm, he's showing mastery over the chaotic forces of the mind. And when he raises the dead, he's demonstrating the awakening from spiritual sleep. Every miracle is a metaphor for transformation, from fear to trust, from ignorance to awareness, from separation to unity. Even the concept of sin takes on a new meaning in this light. Sin is not a moral stain, it's forgetfulness. It's the moment you fall asleep to your own divine nature. Redemption, then, is simply remembering who you are. That's why Christ's forgiveness is so radical. He doesn't forgive because you're guilty. He forgives because you were never separate to begin with. This understanding changes everything. It means you are not broken, not fallen, not unworthy. You are consciousness temporarily dreaming itself as a person. Your suffering is not punishment, it is initiation. Every hardship, every loss, every night of the soul is the invitation to awaken. And this is where psychology meets spirituality. Carl Jung, one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, saw Christ as the archetype of the self, the symbol of wholeness. Jung believed that every person carries within them the same divine pattern, the journey from fragmentation to unity, from ego to awareness. The cross, to him, was not just a religious image but the tension of opposites that we must integrate within ourselves: light and dark, masculine and feminine, spirit and matter. To make the two one, as the Gospel of Thomas says, is the essence of individuation. This process is not comfortable. It demands that you face your shadow, the parts of yourself you've exiled or denied. But as Jung taught, what you resist not only persists, it rules you unconsciously. Transformation begins the moment you stop fighting your darkness and begin listening to it. Christ's descent into hell before resurrection mirrors this exact inner process, the willingness to face the depths before rising into light. And that is why the cross, in its deepest sense, is not a symbol of death. It's a symbol of integration. The vertical line represents the divine dimension, the eternal presence. The horizontal line represents the human, the temporal, the earthly. Their intersection is you, the point where heaven and earth meet in consciousness. When you awaken to that center, suffering transforms into meaning. But society has largely lost this understanding. Religion became dogma, and psychology became sterile. We divided what was never meant to be divided: spirit and mind, God and human. The result is the modern crisis of meaning. People chase pleasure, power, and distraction, yet feel emptier than ever. The soul has been exiled, and Christ's symbol has been misunderstood as something to worship rather than something to live. To reclaim that symbol is to reclaim your inner divinity. It's to understand that enlightenment is not escape, it's embodiment. Christ doesn't ask you to become him. He invites you to realize that you already share his essence. When he says, "I and the Father are one," it is not arrogance, it is awakening. It is the same realization the mystics across all traditions have expressed. The drop and the ocean are not two. So what does it mean for you here and now? It means that every time you choose presence over reaction, compassion over judgment, truth over illusion, you resurrect. Every moment you face fear with awareness, you participate in the eternal story of transformation. You don't need to wait for salvation. You are the continuation of that sacred process happening in real time, through your consciousness. The symbol of Christ lives not in churches, but in hearts that dare to awaken. It's in every act of forgiveness, every breath of awareness, every quiet surrender to what is. The divine doesn't demand worship, it seeks realization. And once you understand that, you see that the real miracle is not walking on water, but walking through life awake. So perhaps the real question is not whether Christ existed, but whether you will let the Christ within you come alive. Because the symbol only fulfills its purpose when it's embodied. When you become the presence that observes, forgives, and loves unconditionally, you are no longer seeking transformation. You are it. Now, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what part of you is still nailed to the cross of illusion? What belief, what fear, what attachment are you ready to release so that something greater can rise within? If this message resonated with you, take a deep breath, reflect on what it awakened in you, and share your thoughts below. Which teaching from Christ's story feels most alive within you right now? Remember, awakening is not about reaching somewhere new. It's about remembering what has always been true. The kingdom is not coming. It's already here, waiting for you to see it. If this video inspired you, give it a like, share it with someone who needs light today, and subscribe for more reflections like this. Until next time, stay present, stay awake, and keep walking the path of inner transformation.